want to now talk about variables. Variables are fundamental to programming. They're fundamental to many things. We just don't call them variables. For instance, take a cup of coffee, for example. Now, a cup of coffee stores the coffee, correct? And you're going, David, do you really need to state those kind of obvious things? Yes, I do. So the cup has the coffee in it, okay? Because we need something to drink our coffee from. Otherwise, we're going to end up like Mr. Bean, okay? And if you don't know who Mr. Bean was, Mr. Bean opened his mouth and put coffee and then water and okay, doesn't work. So variables, why are variables? Because variables store the data that we're going to be using in our programs, okay? So what it is, it's a piece of memory. And in that bit of memory, we store data. That's it. We store data and we retrieve data from it. We can also change the data that's in there. So we give it a name, okay? And this name is also known as an identifier. It's the identifier of that data, if you like. Now, when we create them, we do what's called, we declare it. So this is an example here. I say it must be declared. So I'm actually going to say we've got this here actually is reserved. It's a reserved word within Java, int, which means integer. And it means what the variable is going to be an integer. Now I've given it a name, okay, or this is the identifier. And in this case, I've said this is an integer. Very complex. Okay, but you'll notice with a variable, the very first letter is a lowercase letter. And then when there's more words in it, each new word starts with a capital letter, but there aren't any spaces in it. Okay, and this is the convention we're going to be using. We can have a constant. Now, a constant, which is always funny to say this, is a variable. It's not a variable, it's a constant, but it is a constant, so it is a variable in that sense that the value, when we set it, can't be changed. Okay? So that's it. And this is how we go about setting it: public, static, final. So these are all what are called reserve words. You'll notice int, we've seen that before, but public, static, final. It's final, it's set. And you'll notice the difference here is I've created max in all capitals, and that is a convention that we use. So I'm quickly looking at my program and I can say, there's a constant. Now, literal values. What are, literal values? And let's see if I can get back to where I was. So a literal value are these: 12, -15, 22. These kinds of things are literal values because they are literally values. And we've got here real numbers, okay, 22.0987, -3.4. These are literal values. That's it. Now, how do we go about assigning values? How do we get stuff into them? Okay, so to do that, we use the assignment operator. Okay, now the assignment operator is that one there, like that. And most of us call it the equal sign, but in programming, it's the assignment operator. And you'll see why it's the assignment operator. So, int, we've seen this before, and I'm going to just point out again to reiterate each new word, no spaces, but the very first letter of the variable, of the identifier, is a lowercase, and then each new word in the name of it starts with a capital. And you'll say, int, this is an integer. Normally, we would say as non-programs equals 12, but not in programming. We say 12, okay, assign, or this integer is assigned 12. So we're assigning, okay, so assigning 12 to this is, and I'm running out of space on my slide, and besides that, okay, so we assign 12 to, so what is on the right hand side gets assigned to what's on the left hand side, okay? What's on the right is assigned to what's on the left. There we go, just what I said. 12 is assigned to the variable, this is an integer. That's it. Straightforward. Now when I go looking at this point in time for this is an integer, I will discover it has the value 12 in it. There we go. So here's an example of declaring and assigning values to variables. What you'll notice is double, double, char, char, string, string, boolean, boolean. Okay, these things here at the beginning, and we'll talk more about these in the next few slides, are the data types. Okay, what do I mean by data type? The type of data that's stored or can be stored within the variable. So I have a variable latitude. Latitude is assigned 53.4308. Char. Okay, so you notice double, we've got doubles, real numbers. Okay, char, we have a single character. String is a string of characters. Okay, and booleans are true or false. All right, so I've said this already, but I'm going to say it again. Data types, it's the type of data that we stick in the variables. As you've seen in Java, we specify the data type when we declare the variable. What do I mean by that? You've seen me, I've gone int. This is me. I'll just do that so it's a lot less. Okay, so int is integer. So the type of data that can be stored in this variable is integer. That's it. Nothing else can be stored in it. And if I try to store something else in it, I'm going to have a problem. So we have this here. Okay. If I'm looking at that, my data type is in this first one, double. Latitude is assigned 53.4308. A Boolean, true or false. I've called it the worst and I've assigned false to it. Okay. The syntax is pretty straightforward. The challenge when it comes to data types is thinking through what data type should I use for this variable. And some of you will be going, that's obvious, David. Let's have a look at some examples where it might not be as obvious as you think. Triangle, side A. I would say probably real. Year of birth. It's obviously an integer. 19, I'll go with mine, 1987. Sorry, I may have got that one wrong. Anyway, compiler won't know that. So, year of birth, I'll go with 1987. All right, pretty straightforward. Student name, string of characters. Again, straightforward. You're going, David, I thought you said it might be challenging. Let's have a look at this. Some more complex ones. Date of birth. How do we store the date of birth? Think that one through. 6 or 8 digit integer. Or do we store it as 3 different integers? Or do we store it as integer, string, integer? I don't know. Something you have to think through. Age. How old are you? Well, if you're my age, you tend to think in integers. You're, I'll say, 40 until the day you turn 41. If you're a little kid, you aren't just 4, you're 4 1/4, or you're 4 1/2. You're almost 5. So is it an integer or is it a real? With a phone number, you can think about that and go, do I ever add to a phone number? And when I say that, my number, let's say, is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Dave Cooper, who sits in the office next to me, is his 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 plus 1. Okay, those kinds of things. So that can help you understand when it comes to integers and strings or reals and strings, you have to think through, what am I going to be doing with this data long term? Okay, so that gives you a bit of insight into variables.